virtual gatherings. We do them the first Wednesday of every month. If you have never been, thanks so much for coming. And if you come all the time, thank you so much for coming. I would not be here doing this, and I would not have a part on the executive staff without you all. So thank you so, so much. And if you're just getting in here, yes, we just started. I am just a face talking right now, which is part of the webinar format. So I say it every month, and I know the people that come all the time get annoyed with it. So I apologize, but we always have new people. Tonight is a webinar format, so I cannot see any of you all. The only people I can see are my super awesome panelists that work behind the scenes with me. So I can't see you, and our presenter won't be able to see you, but we have a Q&A function for you to use to ask all of the questions. Julie's going to answer all of the questions at the end of her presentation. So just use that Q&A function if you have any questions, because we can't see you. And the chat moves so fast, which is awesome, but it's hard for us to keep track of. I do have an amazing person behind the scenes. Christine always helps me throw links out for you guys. She does all kinds of good stuff, but the chat moves quickly and I have a hard time keeping up with it. So tonight we're just going to use that Q&A function. Julie's going to answer everything at the end of her presentation, and we have so much more to talk about. So again, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you guys are here. We are going to have an awesome, awesome night. Let's see there. I see the chat's already moved so fast from when I went. Violet's here, Sheila's here. Yay. I watched Into the Wild and Foraging Scares. I don't know what that is. I don't know if I want to watch that. Oh, Perrysburg, Ohio. Welcome, you guys. Yay, we have such a wide variety tonight. I'm super excited for that. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you have not been here in a couple of months, we no longer do breakout rooms. So when I say that it's going to be just a webinar format tonight, it really is just a webinar. We found that while the breakout rooms were working for a few people, the majority of people had other commitments that they would have to leave, and they didn't get to participate. They didn't get their questions answered by the speaker because we would have to cut the speaker's time short to get over to the breakout rooms. So now our Julie, who's our speaker tonight, will be able to do her whole presentation and then be able to answer all of your questions. So that's what we're doing if you haven't been in a couple of months. Now, I talk a lot on here, and I always bring in fun friends to join us. And soon I'm going to pass things over to Cindy Ball, but not quite yet because I'm not there yet. But Cindy Ball will be coming on. If you all have never been a part of National Ladies Homestead Gatherings, I just want you all to know that this is like a super fun community. I know that we're from all over and we all do different things. My favorite part of this is that we homestead our own ways, right? Like, I'm not going to do it the same as Julie does it, or the same as Cindy does it, or Christine, or June, or Teresa. All of us here that you will see tonight, some of us are on the executive staff. I think the majority of us are somewhere in this world, but we're nowhere near each other. Like, we have Idaho, New Mexico, Montana, Pennsylvania, Ohio. There's all kinds of places all over. So I love that because it brings us all together. We can all go over all kinds of things, share with everyone. It's my favorite. I love it. So if you've never been, don't worry. This is all about sharing knowledge. We have such a good time together. We learn all kinds of things. My kids will interrupt 30 times. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So Cindy, why don't you come on and tell us all about why you started this, what this is all about. It's one of my favorite parts, that you come on and tell us why we do this whole shebang.
You are so cute. And she does it with all her kids in the background. A huge applaud to you, Julie, for making this happen every month. All right, I am here. First of all, if you are on here because we met you in Kansas this last weekend, and we told you about this fabulous virtual gathering that we have once a month, special welcome to you. I'm hoping that a lot of you that we talked to are here tonight to start your adventure into the National Ladies Homestead Gathering. The second thing I just have to share, and this is more directed to Julie or anybody who lives in Montana. So I learned all the foraging in Georgia. So the Appalachian Mountains, which have so many different medicinal plants. But when I moved to Montana, I had to learn all over again. And my one jewel that I found in these national forests is arnica. And the mountain right behind my cabin in a few weeks will be covered with arnica. And so I'm so excited. I try and get as much as I can, but I harvest respectfully and make sure there's enough for the next season. But yeah, I know, right, Kimberly? I'm so excited about the arnica. All right, why are we here tonight? The reason that NLHG exists is to empower women through homesteading. This is the reason that we are all here together, because in some aspect, we all have a claim to our fame is rooted in homesteading. And as I like to say, homesteading doesn't mean you have to have 100 acres. Homesteading means you do at home instead of going to the store. So if you live in a city, but you grow your own herbs on the windowsill, we consider you a homesteader. If you have lots of acres and lots of animals, we also consider you a homesteader. So welcome here. All right, and our mission statement, how we make this all happen, the empowering of women. We share knowledge, we build community, and we grow friendships. And I am here to attest to the fact that my closest friends, my very closest friends, are women that I have met in the last 12 years of the National Ladies Homestead Gathering. So Julie, I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you for the fabulous job that you and Christine are doing tonight.
Always a pleasure, Cindy. Always a pleasure. I enjoy it. We always have such a fun time on here. So thank you for coming on. Now, another one of my favorite people is coming on, and she's doing double duty tonight. So I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to tell you about the next thing that she's doing, which I'm excited about as well. So, Atta Girls, if you have been on, you know these. If you're on our private online community, which is community.nlhg.org, Atta Girls is one of the most fun posts on there. They gives us all a chance to kind of share what we're proud of and what we've been doing. So June is going to come on and share those. However, as our membership director, she's also in charge of our VIP Member Appreciation Month, which is next month. June is already around the corner. So she's going to share those details with you as well. So the beautiful and lovely June. Oh, look at your pretty hair tonight. I love it. You're so pretty. What are all of our other people been up to, and what have you been up to, and what is up with VIP Member Appreciation?
Thank you, Miss Julie. Thank you. So I'm speechless about the hairdo. So usually it's just in a big pile. That's a sign that when you actually brush it, people notice. So I'm so excited to share this month's Atta Girls. Each month I do a post in our online community about Atta Girls. Post what you've done this last month, and so we can cheer you on. It could be something that wasn't super successful, but you did try it. So I'm going to share some of those with you, and then we'll talk about our VIP member appreciation. So exciting. Diana shared her hubby built her raised garden beds. She has 7 things planted and about to start more seeds to plant in weather temps. Maureen started tomatoes, peas, and radishes indoors. Chelsea found shepherd's purse on her property to add to her list of foraged items and tinctures. I had another set of goat twins born on Easter, she said. Oh, how fun. All right. Jacqueline shared that she made a raised garden bed and then also did a setup for watermelon and some fun sunflowers planted. She made her own flea and tick spray and also got all of the cleaners for her house all remade. She loves making her own things. That's fantastic. Atta girl, ladies. Jacqueline, feel free to share the recipe for your cleaners or your flea and tick spray in our community as well. Melody shared she's done so much. She's trying to narrow it down. They've been working on rearranging the garden, did lots of changes, raised fence to help deter deer, moved strawberry bed, another bed and planted it with asparagus, planted a pear tree, and a couple days ago had hubby build some birdhouses to hang around the garden. Debbie had her first quail egg on her homestead. You ladies have been busy, lots of gardening activity. Sheila finished unpacking all the boxes from her move in September of 2021, so her husband could start demoing the front porch. Christy got her first cow, a 5-month-old Jersey heifer. Lucy Lou has brought her so much joy already. Her husband said she is his new best friend. Sweet. She posted a picture. And Ruth has some purple dead nettles dried now, and she needs plantain to put in a salve she's going to make. It's supposed to be good for insect bites. Yay. So atta girl, ladies, you have done an amazing job. Thank you so much for sharing those in our community. And there are a whole bunch more. So make sure you go on and check that out. Now, for the fun part, that's super fun, but this is super exciting. This year, we're celebrating our VIP members in the month of June, the entire month of June. What is a VIP member? It is a very invested partner. So it's someone who pays just $35 a year to partner with us. That's saying you want to walk alongside of us, you believe in the work we're doing, you want those perks of being a member. You're going to be a partner in what we're trying to accomplish. So everyone that is a VIP member before June 1st of this year, you have to be current, you're going to be entered into a drawing. And the entire month of June, we are celebrating our very invested partners by having a drawing each Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And Roots and Harvest has sponsored some incredible prizes. So there will be 2 prize winners each week. And the prizes are really fun packages worth about $100 for each prize package. So Roots and Harvest, we are so grateful for your sponsorship. So be sure to check out their website as well. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing to celebrate our VIP members in the month of June. One thing I ask of you is if you have a story to share of how being a part of National Ladies Homestead Gathering has enriched your life, how you love our community, what you love that we are doing, what you're enjoying sharing, all of those things. If you have a story you'd like for us to share on one of our Wednesday evening prize giveaways, please email me at membership@nlhg.org with those stories. And make sure if you have any questions at all, reach out to your chapter leaders, or you can send an email as well to that email address and we will get that answered. Again, it's just a $35 annual fee. You're more than welcome to make an additional donation at the time you purchase your membership and partner with us to continue what we're doing. And our theme this year is growing together. So we're celebrating with partnership, perks, and prizes. Thank you, Julie.
That's so awesome, June. I know we've been talking a little bit about how you're going to come on during virtual gathering next month, but there's so much more than that. It's going to be great. June, yay. Well, ladies, telling you, this is the place to be, the organization to be a part of. Obviously, I'm biased, but just saying. And June already said it, but I would love to hear from all of you on community.nlhg.org. Even if you can't become a VIP member, I know things are crazy right now, but even if you can't, join our private online community. The access to the plethora of knowledge and the supportive community, you really can grow some awesome friendships from across the country. So make sure you check out community.nlhg.org. We'd love to have you be on there and participating with us. So another part of being part of that online community, I feel like I'm saying the word part a lot, is our upcoming cookbook. And Teresa, our director of fundraising, there we go, Julie, get words out. She is here to tell us about the cookbook because it's awesome too.
Hey, Julie, thank you. And June, my goodness, I wish my hair was as pretty as yours. I have hot hair, but it's all good. Ladies, we came so close. if you were here with us last month, you know that I challenged you to add 100 new recipes to our submissions before this gathering tonight. And I would personally give away 2 cookbooks. Didn't quite get there, but I am really excited by the numbers of you that did submit. And gosh, we were so close, you guys. So I believe in you. I'm going to make the same offer this month. Starting tonight, if we can get 100 new recipe submissions before our gathering next month, then I will give away 2 free cookbooks to all of those. You know, you'll be in the drawing if you're in attendance tonight. Miss Julie Bowen will help with that because she's got a list of who's here. You guys, the recipes that are coming in are absolutely amazing. And, you know, June was talking about the Atta Girl, the lady who made the insect bite stuff. Those recipes count, you guys. Those are kinds of things we'd like to hear, not just, you know, Grandma Hazel's cookies. So please join us. This cookbook, the funds that are raised from this cookbook help to support you. They go to help support your communities and let you grow new members and help us to grow new communities. And what that means is that we have more ladies who join us and that feel empowered in our mission in building community and sharing knowledge and growing friendships. It's all part of the big picture. So I hope you're able to jump on. I hope you'll share your recipes. I will tell you, there were enough new submissions that Joanna and Sheila and I have got some catching up to do. And, you know, we're not scared. Let's see if you can overwhelm us. All right. All right. Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you soon. You can find the place to submit your recipes on the national website under Get Involved tab. I've also posted regularly in the national community in Mighty Networks. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, fundraising@nlhg.org. Thanks, Julie.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And I know that Christine has dropped the link in there. So if you guys want to copy and paste that link for the cookbook submissions, do that because I want to do another giveaway. And they're so fun. So do it. Come on. No, I'm just kidding. But really do it. Okay. I have like 2 more things to say. We're actually running a little ahead of schedule. So I'm kind of proud of myself. So I'm going to try and say all the things. Now, number 1 is that every month, Jill Wolf, our fabulous marketing director, adds new stuff, creates all kinds of fun themes and memes and all kinds of things in our shop. So this month we don't have a coupon code. I already had an email about it today, but we do not have a coupon code. But that's okay because the shop is still full of stuff and there's lots of things. If you're a VIP member, I hear it's going out in a newsletter. So be ready for that. But go check out our shop. It's nlhg.org. I know Christine's going to drop that link because she's on it. But make sure you check that out. And the last thing I'm going to say before I bring the amazing Julie out is that we have another national event coming up, and I'm very excited for it. It's in Wallace, Idaho. So early registration is open from now until May 15th for all VIP members. And like I said, this is a national gathering. So it'll be like 2 days of speakers all sharing their wealth of knowledge and their experience about all things homesteading. And there's going to be demonstrations and booths so you can explore, you can connect. I know that Miranda's done a ton of work on that. It's going to be a great gathering. So like I said, it's going to be October 6th and 7th in Wallace, Idaho. I don't think I said the dates, so my bad. I'll say them one more time. October 6th and 7th. And the early registration is open from now until May 15th for VIP members. So make sure you get in there and check that out. And a new thing that's been added to this, if you've been seeing the information about it, they're going to have a walking tour on October 8th. So if you want to make a whole weekend of it, do it. That's going to be walking in their footsteps. It's a North Idaho's Trailblazing Women. So I think that's going to be awesome. I think that'll be so much fun. So it's a walking tour that will be October 8th, and that's optional, but the national gathering will be October 6th and 7th. So make sure you check that out. Registration is on our website. I know Christine will drop the link. And whoo, look at that. Just 4 minutes early. That's exciting. So I'm going to, I have to find Julie on my screen, and I'm going to give her video permission. Sometimes I do the wrong thing and then they can't do anything. Yes, I want to make her a co-host. There she is. I have Julie's presentation, so I'm going to turn my camera off for a second and then share my screen while Julie catches you up on how amazing she is, even though she won't say how amazing she really is, but she is.
Nervous as all get out. I will admit that. And apologies, firstly, because I have suffered a bit of lack of sleep. But I will get right into it. Firstly, I want to thank everybody for your attendance to this webinar, especially those of you that recommended me to provide it. It means a lot because the topic of foraging correlates with my greatest passion in homesteading, and that is native plant permaculture. And I'll get to that, but to introduce myself, my name is Julie Ibera, and I live with my family in Oak Harbor, which is a small town located in Northwest Ohio. We are surrounded by wetlands. I live right next to Lake Erie, and I see bald eagles every day. If you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide for me. Maybe. I'll think about it. There we go. So you can see my mug and my kids. So we have a lot of great things up in this area, and I started my farm, the Misty Mushroom, which is on Google Maps. So if you're ever curious where we are located at, you can actually roll it up in Google Maps and find out exactly how far away I am. And if you're ever in the area for whatever reason, and like I said, there's a lot of people that come up this way to view the wetlands, to look at the birds, and or go to Cedar Point. But for whatever reason, if you're coming through this way, please by all means drop me a line. I absolutely adore having people for tea. You can certainly pick my brain, or you can go to Ohio's June convention. I'll be there. You can pick my brain there as well. But we are a relatively new homestead. But you can also catch up with me on social media. I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have a YouTube channel that sadly needs to be updated, but I do a lot of videos on TikTok, and I have an Etsy account where I occasionally put up merchandise that I make here. And we live on a modest 1 acre of land. And that acre of land, if you were to sit there and say what your goals were for your homestead, it's a bit daunting when you have more than an acre. It's daunting with just an acre alone. And there was a lot that we wanted to accomplish here by using every single square foot. So there's some things that we've put into the ground. If you wouldn't mind, next slide, to just show the little bit of the map here. We've built a couple of things up, but there's a lot going forward for our future. I've started the orchard. We have a vegetable garden out back. We have the coop, and I've started some of the woodland area, but we still have a lot in store going forward. Especially trying to sweet talk the farmer that owns the land next to us, so that way I can sweep that up and possibly have some livestock besides poultry. But one of the biggest goals was to have sustainable options for our family. We wanted to produce enough food on our land that we would be able to have sustainable options while producing enough in excess that I could then market to others to obtain goods and services that our land does not allow. But also, I wanted to have enough in excess that I could donate to people in need. And it's one of the reasons why this organization means so much to me. Those values of knowledge, community, and friendship are very important and correlate so deeply with my passions in homesteading. And I'm the educational coordinator for the Sandusky County chapter. Um, and I have a lot of fun doing that. If you would mind, next slide. And then it just has our logo. And then you can go on to the next slide after that, which is my mission statement. My mission statement is to facilitate concepts of permaculture and agriculture, utilizing native Ohio plants in order to gain greater value of our land, increasing self-sustainability, and raising biodiversity, all while upholding wise land management practices that create a greater balance with nature. From the smallest mushroom to the tallest tree, I believe that by harmonizing ourselves with the land, that we can resolve issues with pest management, loss of pollinators, and reduce our footprint, all while improving the soil, our health, and environment for long-term benefits. And that's pretty wordy, so I'm going to break it down a little bit. I've mentioned the word permaculture a couple of times, and so that we're all on the same page, you wouldn't mind next sliding for me. Permaculture is loosely defined as copying systems in nature for the greater benefit of our usage while maintaining harmony in the land in which we reside on. It's basically using plants with a purpose. In the same way that in a vegetable garden, you would use plants in companion planting. Companion planting is not exclusive to our vegetable gardens. In fact, that's how all of our ecosystems exist, is we have plants working together, working against each other, working around each other, all to do a variety of things. And if you look up permaculture online, you'll find a lot of similarities in the information that is being provided. You'll see plants with a purpose, plants that are repelling pests, plants that attract pollinators, plants that are used to suppress weeds. And then you have fixers, accumulators, mulchers. There's a lot of words thrown around. Dynamic accumulators is another one, talking about plants that bring nutrients to your topsoil. And comfrey is one of them that's frequently mentioned. It sends down a 10-foot deep taproot and has medicinal usages. But within a permaculture setup, it is one of the most frequent ones that is talked about. And what bothered me with it was the fact that non-native comfrey, because there are actually native comfreys to the United States, non-native comfrey is easily invasive, sends down that deep taproot, sends out a lot of seeds. And if you're not watching it and taking those seed heads off, it can quickly become a problem. And I wanted to choose something that was going to be more beneficial for my land long term. And I started looking into native plants. And I wondered why there wasn't the information out there, because native plants fill multiple roles within our ecosystem. The three that are here on the screen, starting on the left, you have goldenrod, then you have golden Alexander, and then you have your asters, all which have a variety that are across our nation. All three of these plants, and it's not just these three plants, there's many others that fit this bill, but they attract pollinators. They also are known and listed by the Xerces Foundation for their ability to attract beneficial insects such as taconid flies, parasitoid wasps, soldier beetles, a myriad of other beneficial bugs to your garden. And many of these plants provide substantial soil nutrition. If you would go to the next slide. I looked into some research about what these plants brought to the surface, and I got this from a Duke University research paper. On the bottom there, you see comfrey, and it shows that some of the nutrients that it brings up into its leaves. And it is noted when people talk about it long term that it does bring up nutrients. I won't debate that. But let's compare it to number 33, Echinacea coneflower, native Echinacea. Notice the values on there for every single value are higher than those listed for comfrey. Echinaceas are found across our nation. They do have medicinal value and they send down a deep taproot. They have the ability to last through fires, resistant to deer, and they attract native insects. They attract our native bees, which will want to feed exclusively on our native flowers. The other ones I included up on the top there, just so you can see how much some of these plants strip nutrients from the topsoil. Things like horsetail. Others that are high on that list are stinging nettle and lamb's quarters. And it stands to reason that those are so nutritional for us to eat because they take so many nutrients from the soil around them. Next slide, please. The big thing about why I bring this up is because we have gorgeous native plants that have a lot of different uses for us and our homesteads that are not being talked about enough. And we have things like passion flower vine, and depending upon where you live in the United States, there are very different types in the Passiflora family that you can find that are native to you. Passiflora incarnata is one that is familiar to Ohio and a bit of the eastern side. And it is a glorious flower. When you look at it, you can't believe that this is, this is not a tropical flower, although it does have a few varieties that are tropical by nature. This one is a host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly. The leaves, the flowers are usable for us in teas and have medicinal quality. They provide a nice uplifting mood and they're very gentle. And it also produces a fruit, a maypop that you can eat. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned the passion flower vine because I'm an avid hiker. My husband and I are big on adventuring. And he sees the big picture. He's always looking out at sunrises and sunsets. He checks out the topography of an area. He loves to climb up high, and he's always looking big. And I look at the small details. I'm always crawling in the dirt, looking at some moss or lichen or looking for mushrooms. Whatever it is, we have a love of adventuring. And because we share kind of the big and the small details, we get to experience a lot. And I am what you would call a professional dawdler. I do not hike for the mileage. I hike for the experience. And I've been hiking since I was a kid and exploring the wilds since I could with my grand fearlessness. And one thing that I've noticed within the last, I'll say 10, 20 years, is that there has been a huge amount of invasive species and many plants like the passion flower vine I don't see in the wild. There's a lot of plants that I remember seeing as a kid that I haven't found in years. Next slide. One of the invasive species that I'll talk about is the Amur honeysuckle because I've done some research on it and it's an easy one for me to talk about. If you go to your state website, you can find what invasive species are in your state. And invasive species are not, invasive can be used for both native plants and non-native plants. but I'm specifically talking about invasive non-native plants. These are plants that have come from other countries that have taken over. Amur honeysuckle is one of the many bush honeysuckles that exists that is slowly, well, quite rapidly taking over woodlands. Now, 5 reasons why you do not want this on your homestead. Because there are foragers out there that will tell you that there are forageable options with this, but this is a very, very hated plant, as many invasive ones are. With Amur honeysuckle, number 1, it is not native, so it does not provide anything beneficial for any of our beneficial insects. Number 2, it sends down growth inhibitors into the soil that prohibits the growth of other plants around it. And with this, it creates dense thickets where only it grows. And in those dense thickets, number 3, it produces a ideal micro ecosystem for mosquitoes. It's also been noted that forests that have dense populations of these bushes are also known to have a higher population of ticks. There is also birds, number 4, bird species like the American robin that build their nests within bush honeysuckles have been noted to their nests being preyed more highly upon by snakes. And birds that eat these berries are not as nutritious for our bird species, which could have very detrimental long-term effects to our bird populations. And number 5, this does not provide anything useful besides possibly firewood for your homestead. And I bring up those 5 reasons because when we talk about foraging, we're talking about using plants on our land. And when we have plants like this, next slide, please, we lose a lot of other plants that rely on the space that they are taking over, like northern spicebush, which is a glorious, and there's a lot in the Lindenare family that you can find. But the northern spicebush is what I know of specifically because it grows in a reserve very close to me in a good abundance. It's beautiful. It has a very clove-like smell to the bark when you rub it or scratch it. Its leaves have a bit of that aroma. The leaves can be used in a tea. The berries that are produced after it flowers and leaves out, the berries can be used as an allspice alternative. And it's a host plant for the spicebush swallowtail. It's a good understory tree that you can have. But unfortunately, it's often confused when people talk, when they say that they've seen it. Next slide. There are lookalikes. Witch hazel is native. There are native witch hazels. Lots of great medicinal usage with that as another native shrub. But the one that I'm mentioning is Forsythia, which has taken over a lot of woodland areas. You can find it especially around a lot of like the Appalachian Range, where it has snuck into the woodland and is taking over. And it's not alone on that. You'll see things like wisteria. We've got now like an abundance of Bradford pears. I could talk miles about that and my hatred of that tree. But we've got so many other invasive species that are taking over and pushing out plants that would be more usable for us as homesteaders. And so next slide, the topic that I have is foraging for our future, shepherding the wild to sustain tomorrow. For the amount that we have as homesteaders to be able to shepherd the land, I consider to be of great value. There has been a growing interest within growing local, there has been a great interest within foraging for people that are, I would say, outside of homesteading. I would consider foraging to be the gateway topic for people to get into homesteading. In many ways, that you see a lot of people who live in lower socioeconomic areas who are getting a great interest in foraging because it is an opportunity to obtain free food. It is an opportunity to get local food. And the big problem with that, can you go to the slide that says foraging benefits? They're supposed to be in order, but apparently they like to do their own dance. Not sure why it decided to put it out of order. But there is a big interest in foraging. And I will say this briefly, but not to focus on it. One of the big things people are getting an interest in, there are a lot of state, federal, and local parks that do not allow foraging to occur. So it is something that um, was one of the driving forces of me wanting to grow native plants on my land, was that I could control, well, to a certain extent, control the invasive species on my land, and I could shepherd my land and cultivate wild varieties. And greater goal would be to have sustainable options that, in case your crops fail, to have sustainable options that are available to you if things go bad. If you lose an entire reliance, you have backup options that are through native plants that are made to thrive and survive in your zone. Can you find the foraging benefits?
I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second and see if it just didn't get downloaded when you emailed it to me, because that would be what I would have done.
I can also turn my camera maybe. Maybe. Okay. If you want to turn back on my screen, I can have it on my computer. Just don't mind the sleeping dog in the background. He's a bed thief. So foraging benefits have a lot that we can provide our families. And outside of the nutritional benefits, which there's many nutritional benefits to get from obtaining food in the wild. We've got, oyster mushrooms, chicken of the woods. These were actually some wild apples that were bigger than crab apples. May have just been a wild variety of apple that maybe was a heritage that somebody had years ago that I found. Nanny berries, delicious, taste like grapes. There's just a lot of options to open up our palates with foraging. And for me, one of the big things is involving my family in foraging. My daughter here, she's only 2 when I took this photo. You can see my son back there. He's doing some
God,
very
come on.
he's doing
Sorry.
some tough automotive work. But my daughter sat there, I cracked acorns, and she sat there with me for 30 minutes and opened them up and put the meat into the cup, and she helped me out. Foraging is time consuming. It takes a lot to process a good amount of foraging food. And so involving your family with it gives you the opportunity to have um, identification, to just have that moment outside and to really get just an understanding of things in just around you. So the rules of foraging, every forager has their rules, and I'll tell you mine because these are the ways that I rule myself with. Precaution is the number one rule of foraging for me, and precaution fits the other topics that go along with. We use precaution when we try new food. We never know what we could be allergic to, and that would go if you were trying something new at a restaurant. You would want to try new food in a safe place where you can know if you're going to have a reaction or not. Precaution also allows for us to ensure that we take the extra steps necessary to make sure that it's okay for our health. Everybody has different health needs. There are some plants that some people just should not have due to whatever they got going on. So precaution also when we go to where we forage and to make sure that we have permission to forage where we are at. Identification is one of the biggest things in foraging that a lot of people are leery about. And it's understandable why, because there are some dangerous lookalikes that are out there. There's some real easy things that beginners can look for, and then there's more complicated ones. But even a experienced forager will say that they've made a mistake. So always taking the time to identify is important. And conservation, we should use wise decisions when we go out and we harvest because there are things like service berry that can be taken in excess. Service berries are delicious if you can beat the birds to them, but other plants like ramps can be completely wiped out if an entire colony is over harvested. It can take up to 20 years for that colony to reestablish in that number. And we see this greater effect with a lot of our medicinals. A lot of the medicinal plants that exist out in the wild are in danger because they have been over harvested. So we use conservation with precautions to understand what we're harvesting and how much we can take. And using native plants have a lot of different uses. There's so many different ways that they are beneficial for us. So I have this is my common photo, where I'm wearing my very stylish socks on my land, and not these big tall flowers, but the ones that are the bushy ones right there. That is blue vervain. I make a tincture with that. You can see it there, and that is found all across our nation. It's a real easy one to find around waterways. Although honeybees are not native, the bees do enjoy it, but it's very easy to grow and it needs to set down its seeds. But the plants that I talk about, I like to focus on those that are easy to cultivate and easy to cultivate for food, that have or may have medicinal qualities, that improve soil health, or also just have general ecological impacts that are beneficial to have on your land. So that's generally where I focus my talks on and what I look for choosing plants for my land. And it was admittedly difficult to consider what plants I was going to talk about for today's talk because doing a national call involves a lot of plants. And there's no way that I could talk about a good chunk with the time allowed. But let's start at the top. Oak trees. Oak trees is something that almost everybody should be familiar with. And for good reason. They're all across our nation, and there's so many different types. Even in New Mexico, there's an oak tree that's pretty low to the ground. It's like a big old shrub, has tiny little acorns on it. And then you have really tall ones. And I highlight these two because these are the ones that I'm most familiar with. I have a swamp white oak on my land. That's what we harvest from. But this oak here is known for the sweetness of its acorns. Oak trees do take a substantial time to grow, but it's important to talk about them and their ecological impact because oak trees are greatly important, especially if you have the land for your homestead. Did you know that depending on species, they can have anywhere from 400 to 500 different butterflies and moths that utilize oak trees as their host plant, meaning that they lay their eggs on it for their larvae. 400 to 500, and that's just butterflies and moths. I've seen assassin bugs, little baby assassin bugs, hiding out in the leaves of our oak tree. Those assassin bugs will make their way to my vegetable garden to feast on any pests that are on my veggies. These are glorious trees in so many ways. And there are a lot of mushrooms that prefer to grow around oaks. We have many of them in which they use oaks, either like hen of the woods that will grow at the base of dead oaks. We have porcinis that'll grow around them. We have chicken of the woods that will live parasitically on them. We have red chanterelles that will exist within the, they'll live symbiotically with the oak roots. And then we have the indigo milkcap, which is edible. All of these on this page are edible. But oak trees provide such a relationship with all of the creatures that reside within. And that's one reason why, chose them for my mission tape, kind of from the tallest tree to the smallest mushroom. Oak trees have just such a great benefit for us. Okay. Now, can you pull up the slide that says Prunus genus? There we go. Awesome. Oh, maybe. It's going everywhere. Oh my goodness. So another beneficial family of plants, well, not family, a genus of plants that you can have on your homestead is anything from the Prunus genus. Holy crap, there's a lot of them in this family, in this genus. Sorry, I'm always going to mess that up. We have some of them that go as tall as trees, 70 feet high, and others that are shrubs like beach plums that are only maybe 6 foot high. Now, within this genus, we have plums, cherries, peaches, nectarines, almonds, apricots. We've got all of these different varieties within this genus. So no matter where you live in this nation, there is going to be a variety that is native for you. So definitely looking that up and finding that out. These commonly, of course, have larger seeds and less fruit. However, they do provide you with a fruit option should your orchards fail for any reason. It also provides other fun stuff. Next slide. For the choke cherry is one that I am familiar with. Does it have the
Well,
choke
it
cherry?
was in there.
So the choke cherry is one that I'm familiar with, the Prunus virginiana. That one is a 12 to 20 foot tall adaptable shrub. Glorious red berries. It's only called choke cherry because they're very, very tart. But they're great to make the syrup and jam. And that number up there, 381 different butterflies and moths use this as a host plant. Wow. Like, you want to save the butterflies, you want to save our pollinators, our bees, our native bee populations. These are the plants that you want. Next page, we've got the American hazelnut. The American hazelnut is one that is often replaced for others, but it is extremely beneficial to have on your land because of the amount of uses for this. It is a shrub that has over 100 butterflies and moths that use it as a host plant. But of course, it produces hazelnuts that we can eat. Aside from that, though, it provides us with a great option. You can make thickets with hazelnuts, but there's many other plants that you can use to create thickets around areas you want to keep your livestock or add extra like security around your land. But American hazelnut has something else that you can do with it. When it goes dormant, you can chop it down all the way to the bottom, all the way to the ground. And then you have that hazelwood that you can use. You can use it for firewood. You can use it for anything else building that you need to do. And it will grow back. It will start to grow outside of that stump. It's called a coppicing, one of those words. And you then have sustainable wood options while having food options as well. They used to, back in the day, grow these in various sections. So you would harvest one for wood one year, and then you would let it grow back 4 to 6 years down the road, and then you would harvest another one the next year. So you would have this in a rotation. So you would always have usable lumber, usable nuts, and everything else. And this is not exclusive for hazelnuts. You can do this with birch. You can do it with poplars. There's many plants that you can do this to and have sustainable wood options for your land. Common cattail is one that a lot of foragers will talk about. And I'll talk real briefly about it because it is one that does have a lot of benefits. If you can, next slide to that common cattail slide. It, Typho latifolia, you can find across the nation. You can eat every part of this plant. It's beautiful and it does a lot of good for the environment. You always want to take precaution when you're harvesting cattails. You want to make sure you do it from clean waters because cattails, like many of our water plants, have, but cattails especially, pull up a lot of toxins from the water. So they can be used for wetland restoration. And next page. But there is precautions that you need to take when harvesting it to make sure that you identify it correctly from wild irises, which are quite toxic for us. I will tell you, cattail has a lovely cucumber smell if you have a keen nose. But if you look at the leaves, it has that nice crescent moon that is full of water. And there's a lot of other defining features of it. But cattails are not the only edible plant that you can find in and around waterways. The soft stem bulrush is one that has an exceptional amount of range across our nation. Bulrushes in general are utilized for food. Next slide, please. And this one is one that has a pretty wide range. And you can get a look there of the that rhizome and of course like a little bit of the cutting of the stem. And identification, of course, because there are a lot of wetland grasses that have a seed structure very similar to this. There's wool grass, there's a lot of them. But there's quite a few that are edible, and you can harvest the stalk and cook it very much like you would asparagus. Next page. But our waterways have a lot of options available for us. Do you see the one that says Wapato?
I'm sure there won't be because I am apparently on the show tonight.
It's okay. If you want to cut back to my screen, I've got it. There we go. So the Wapato is a beautiful, beautiful tuber that is, and this one is the broadleaf arrowhead, but there is a lot that are within this family across the nation. I mentioned this one specifically because it's pretty advantageous. It grows very thick. And so it's up to us, oh no, to harvest it and eat it. And it's called duck potato for a reason, because it's a great tuber for you to eat. You can even eat it raw if you so choose desire. You can even use it to make a flour. And if you're really good at the boot scoot and boogie, you just get your feet in that water and you kind of do a little scoot around in around those, and you'll push those tubers up. You'll release them and they'll float up, and then you can gather them. So these can generally take a pretty hard harvest because of how thick they grow. There are other types of arrowheads that are more rare and more delicate, and I certainly would not recommend hard harvesting on those, but these, absolutely. Now you can go to the edible tuber screen. There are a ton of edible tubers across our nation, so many different ones. And I can't talk about them all. Like there's a sedge called nut sedge, grows like a weed here, but it has real tiny little tubers that you can eat. And there's a few other species, but the ground nut, that one fixes the nitrogen in the soil that it produces in. You have a sustainable potato that basically fixes the soil that it grows in. And that's the range of it right up there where you see it. It fills a pretty decent range, which is very awesome. And another one, because it's not in the Solanaceae that you would find tomatoes and potatoes in, you can eat these raw. I mentioned Jerusalem artichoke here down at the bottom, mainly because it is very advantageous. It is quite noxious. It takes over areas quite quickly, and it is a sunflower. It's in the Helianthus family. Some people call them sunchokes. Flower is beautiful. They smell great. They do attract quite a few pollinators. They're stately plants. They get, about as tall as me, about 6 foot. And they produce these edible tubers that are just a delight. And a lot of people will try and replant like the bigger ones to try and keep growing bigger artichokes. But they have a tendency to love a nice loose soil. But they're in such an abundance that it's one that generally, if you're foraging, and if you can find them and dig them up and not to misidentify them with others in the Helianthus family, including woodland sunflower, which is pretty common. Um, but you would have these nice, beautiful tubers that come along with it. Precaution is definitely needed for a few others in the tuber family. Oh, the tuber family, I should say, those plants that produce tubers. Can you go to the next slide with the common camas? This is one I've got on the left, the common camas, and then on the right, the wild hyacinth. The range of the common camas is on the western side of the US. The wild hyacinth is on the eastern side. Both of these produce an edible tuber. I don't show a photo of the tuber itself because precaution is a huge thing with identifying this plant correctly. Most of the time, I would say wait till it flowers so that way you can identify it against death camas, which is There in the lower corner, that is one of the many species that are very deadly for us. And there's a lot of death camas that are quite beautiful for pollinators, but definitely precaution in identification. Both of these were eaten extensively historically and have a lot of great options for us to use on our homesteads, especially if you're cultivating them, you know what you have. Just again, also not getting too comfortable and always making sure that you identify correctly. Next slide. I try to include as much of the scientific names for every plant that I have, because oftentimes people will use similar names. They will say something like, oh, I've got wild hyacinths on my land. And you may think they're talking about one of the camaceas, but it is not. They've got an overabundance of grape hyacinths, which you can utilize the flowers for jams and jellies. I haven't done it. Normally, my daughter picks them and says that they're grapes and throws them before I get the opportunity. But these definitely are quite the weed, but also not confusing them and not confusing that name wild hyacinth with common hyacinths and the hyacinthus that are not from here and are quite toxic. And then in the upper left-hand corner, I have common bluebells, mainly because, next slide, please. These are commonly misidentified alongside Virginia bluebells. And in the Mertensia family, and this is one of the cards that I use for my homestead business because I grow native plants. So in the little card icons up in the corner, I've got the crown, that's landscape royalty. This is a very well-behaved plant that you can have on your homestead. Loves rich woodland areas, and it is edible. Holy cow, you can eat it. You can eat the flowers. You can eat the leaves like a nice spinach. Um, Great options with also some medicinal uses. Bees love it, especially bumblebees, and the deer don't favor it. And then next slide. But it's not the only bluebell that is native. I like that one because that one is native to me, but there is northern bluebells, oblong leaf bluebells, and beautiful bluebells that you can find all across our nation. And of course, not confusing it with the common bluebell, which is in a completely different family. And because mentioning stuff that can be harvested for greens, there are so many edible plants. And a lot of foragers like to focus on eat the weeds. And excellent, there's lots of weeds out there that are edible. I'm going to talk about some that you may or may not know about. Greenbriers, my goodness. If you want a vine that you can eat like spinach, that's a perennial option for you to have. Greenbriers would be it. And you harvest the leaves when they're young. And I exceptionally like the smooth carrion flower. I just found that in the wild this last year and have some berries that I'm hoping to grow. We'll see. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers. Um, but the carrion flower produces edible berries for us, and the leaves are edible. And I mean, who doesn't want to make carrion flower jam and, like, sell that to people? But I am also very envious of people that can grow miner's lettuce out west. That is an excellent edible that is listed as being a choice. And it's one that I definitely recommend. It's a much smaller one, but it's got those cute little flowers on it. And there's tons of greens that you can look into for your homestead as just having an option that has so many benefits to our ecosystem and us. Next page. And as stated, there are a lot of cultivated varieties of plants that we use, but it's always nice to have some that are the wild varieties. In the Ribes genus, we have all the currants and gooseberries. And granted, some of those, I mean, most of them, they're much smaller than our cultivated varieties. But it is important to have some on our homesteads that we can use as a in case, and also to provide for the wildlife and have all those bonuses. There are currants that are invasive, um, and because of them escaping cultivation and going into our woodlands. So preserving and keeping a mind on conservation, you can cultivate some of these for the next generation. And then lastly, next slide, grains. It is very important for me to talk about grains. And it is something that I don't think people in foraging talk about enough. And mainly because it takes us from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to an agricultural stability. Little barley is one that you can find across our nation. Not a very big plant, but 100 grams of little barley constitutes almost 24.3% of carbs, 22.4% of protein, 18% of calories, 5 to 6% of fiber and fat, and all for, our recommended caloric diet. Wow, just 100 grams of it. And granted, it does take a bit of the time to process wild grains, but highly beneficial to do so. And there's a lot of grains, holy cow, tons of wild grains, seed bearing plants all across our nation that have huge opportunities for us, especially because of historically things like northern wild rice. I live in an area that used to be known as the Great Black Swamp. This was an area that was so dense with wetland, it was difficult to live in. So for all of our indigenous people that traveled through this area could not do so without having something as great as northern wild rice, because grains travel well and they provide such a good amount of energy. You're looking for carbs when you're foraging. Carbs are a major thing. Protein, another major thing to obtain from our wild plants in order to survive. And it is a good sustainable food alongside your cultivated crops in order to have that stability of the land. And northern wild rice, it is a great option if you have the waterways to do it. But there's a lot of other plants that I'm experimenting with to go forward, like the Illinois bundle flower. Scientific name is Desmanthus illinoisus. Has 38% protein in its seeds versus 40% that you would find in soybeans. It's in the pea family. It's a shrub that gets about 5 feet. It's found on the eastern side of the US, but there is also prairie acacia, Acaciella Augustus Emia. Sorry, I wrote that cursive a little bit rough on my notes. Is a host plant, also has very nutritional seeds. We have options as homesteaders that we can take sustainable grains, utilizing them for our livestock, again, because commercial seeds have a high output, but having sustainable options that are perennial options for us to use if need be, or to have alongside our livestock areas provides extra sustenance for them and means that we can use less seed costs for us. So, whew, that is what I have for you. I think it's time to answer some questions.
Way to go, Julie. Thank you for dealing with whatever I did with the presentation there and my
It's
little
okay.
outburst that doesn't out of my computer. So thank you so much. We do have some questions. So let me get into the chat. Scroll up, you chat. All right, Q&A. All right. How can we tell the difference between the two comfreys?
The comfrey that is from Europe is a lot bigger. There is, I'll be honest, I've never seen native wild northern comfrey in the wild to be able to give a definitive amount of comparable. Native comfrey is smaller from what I have seen online. There are a few others that I haven't looked into yet. I've been looking desperately to try and find native comfrey seeds to cultivate it on my land, because there's been in question of whether or not the medicinal quality is that of the Europe comfrey. Is it on par? Is it more? Is it less? There was a lot of questions there about using it as an alternative. So unfortunately, I think it's smaller, but I'm not sure how much smaller.
That makes sense. Thank you. Sheila, I'm going to come back to your question just because we have another comfrey question. I just heard that comfrey is a great plant for pond banks and river banks because of the long tap roots, but I know it's not native. What native plant can you recommend?
I would recommend any of our great wetland grasses. There's tons of them. Even just up here, there's thousands of different wetland plants that are native to me. So for you, I would definitely look into those that are native to your area. I can always do some looking for you. If you send me a message with where you're from, I can try and do a little bit of homework. But any native grasses, they do an excellent job on stream banks at maintaining the health and maintaining the bank, just all in all.
Melody followed up with her comfrey question is what is small versus large? We have some and they maybe get 2 foot tall.
Let me cross check here. So just to, I don't think I saw the question also ask about the scientific name of it. One of them is, oh goodness, I don't want to butcher this, so I'm just going to show that on the screen there. So it is in the borage family. And the height that it says that this one gets up to 30 inches tall. So
Right.
just a little bit over 2 feet. So it does seem to be sizable. Leaves though, looks a bit comparable. One second.
Perfect. You want to keep looking that one up or you want to go into the next one?
You can go into the next one. I'm just going to flip my screen around here. There it is.
Jennifer asked, what is the web page name where we can go to find out about our state's invaders versus native plants? Did you send me that link? Christine's internet has crashed. So if you did, I'm going to pull up your speaker packet.
I'm not sure if I included that one in just because that would be state specific.
Okay.
We've got our Ohio Department of Resources. They post a lot for us. But if I were to just even look up Indiana invasive species, it's going to pull up like garlic mustard, Japanese honeysuckle, Japanese barberry, autumn olive, but it should cross-check. There's the government website, like for Indiana, where it has rules and regulations, because they have a lot of regulations now about the cultivation of, or the sale of, I should say. So oftentimes you can just key it in and it will give you something that you can go to through your state's resources.
Okay. Next one is, I keep saying I'm going to come back to Sheila's, but I'll just go for is there, if there's time, could Julie talk a little bit about her wetlands? We have a drainage problem and I'd like to work with it. Do you want to answer that one, or you've got 3 others that I don't know time wise?
With wetland restoration, it depends on the extent, because there's a lot of various grasses and plants that can help with wetland restoration, depending upon where you're at and what you're dealing with on your soil, because there's a lot of excellent bushes, shrubs that help to take up extra water. And then there's just tons and tons of grasses and wildflowers that reside within wetland areas, like um, rose milkweed, also called swamp milkweed. Um, oh goodness, there's too many for me to name in a hot minute.
Oh, that's perfect. And you've got plenty of time. I just figured that question might be a little more involved than some of them,
Oh,
but I know very little. So I'm sure Sheila can reach out to you. That's a great question, and that would be a great idea. Okay, let's see. We had someone ask, what about black walnut? How easy to cultivate and process?
I have 2 black walnuts on my land, and honestly, they love to grow. Um, they they definitely send down some growth inhibitors also into the soil. But the difference with them in comparison to like invasive species, because bush honeysuckles are not exclusive in sending out growth inhibitors. Tree of Heaven does. Autumn Olive also does. There's many others that do. But the difference is that black walnut sends down growth inhibitors, but there are native plants that can grow around it, like echinacea. Any like coneflowers can tolerate the juglone that is sent down into the soil, but that's not the only one. There's tons that can tolerate it. Cultivating it is easy. They definitely, the squirrels bury probably a good handful on my land every year, and I'm always pulling them up, even out of flower pots. Um, so they grow, they just definitely take the time. I'd say it's one for the long run, because producing, I think there's one that's on the edge of the property next to mine. That tree's probably over 8 years old and it still hasn't produced. But I think it's maybe the 10-year mark. But definitely worthwhile. Processing them is some time. You have to take the husks off. They have that dark black ink that you can actually use for dyeing fabrics, or making ink out of. The nut, after you have them washed and have all the skins off, then you can start to work on opening them up. I usually talk about acorns because acorns are so easy to harvest, in comparison with
That's
black.
actually our next question. It says, I know you can make flour from acorns. What are some other options?
Um, Flour is the big one for me, just because I use it for making bread. I use it for adding to cookies. It adds a great amount of fatty protein to your recipes. Um, I think there are options that you can do with eating them whole. But generally, I think grinding them up makes them a bit more palatable. It's not that they're grainy, it's just that for me, it's just easier to grind them up, um, and to store them long term as a flour. They store in my fridge, but that's the easiest way that I know of.
I've gone through the chat, ladies. I tried to scroll through. If you still have questions that haven't been answered, if you can do the Q&A. But I've got some that said, what books do you recommend? And I've already dropped the link to all of the ones that you gave me to. So we've got that. And then she said, we have a lot of invasive weeds that I use medicinally across our yard, such as chickweed, dead nettle. If I try to plant more natives around them, will the native plants get choked out?
Depends. Firstly, on books as well. I included some general books on that list. There is a lot of field guides, ton of field guides. People always ask me about mushroom identification field guides, and that's a tricky one because each person has their favorites on field guides for identification. So what's useful for me is not necessarily what's useful for somebody else. That's something that you as a forager, you have to see what you feel comfortable with. I do like good color illustrations. But a lot of times if I'm taking a book with me while I'm hiking, I like a good quick resource. So there's a lot of books out there. With planting around invasive species, it depends upon what the invasive species is or weed is. I have in my orchard mock strawberries. Mock strawberries are everywhere, and there are methods to remove it. Right now, I'm just really not that, I don't care that much because although they kind of twist around and kind of form a bit of a suppressor, the native plants that I have established just kind of grow up through them and don't care. Um, but there's others that are definitely um, a bit more noxious and can take out a lot of what you're trying to establish. A lot of times people will do scheduled mowings, scheduled burnings to update and to maintain the health of their wildflower areas. Um, there's a lot of things to try and eradicate them from your land, but it depends on the weed.
Makes sense. She also asked, are there any recommendations for removing invasive plants and weeds besides pesticides or pulling them?
Ooh, there are some that are so bad that most people will say that they hate using herbicides, but there are some like for any of those bush honeysuckles that they can be pretty noxious, and a lot of times they'll say that's the only way to get rid of them for good. Um, for me, it's the identifying them early, identifying them and addressing them consistently. It does take a lot of work. There's also ways that you can work with forest restoration. There's a lot of people that are discussing forest restoration using pigs. Um, I used chickens next door to take out the garlic mustard, and they did that very, very well. But I also evaluated the land first to see if there was any valuable species that I wanted to protect. Because pigs will take out an entire area, but the benefit is that they do take out everything. And oftentimes there are seeds that are from native plants that are still within that layer, that are brought to the surface and then germinate with the added nutrition. Um, but there's also debate there on using pigs as kind of a extreme method. So evaluating what species that you have that you want to protect, identifying them, and then identifying the invasive ones that you want to remove. Um, if I see bush honeysuckles, I can identify them now when they're young. Um, but some people also wait until they send out all of their leaves and they send out their flowers, and then they will chop them down because they've sent a lot of their energy into making the flowers and making their leaves. Um, and then that way it takes more out, but they will still send up suckers to try and reclaim. and it's a long process. Some people will lay down tarps to just block out everything, but there's seeds from weeds and invasive species that will stay viable for, I hate to say it, 50 years. It's a struggle.
That's awesome. That is all I found, though I'm sure I've missed some of them. That's all I could find. Oh, the koi pond one. Where was that one? I knew I read it. Would having koi fish in your water where you harvest plants be a problem?
Um, well, koi or a carp, um, you know, they're going to eat some of the plants that are going to be in and around. Um, I just haven't worked exclusively with them in the relationship with any of the water plants. I have a small pond that I just installed that's I really wanted to kind of rebel things because we don't have water on our land. I do want to get a um, backhoe to take out a portion of the front to make a wetland area. But I figured I'd test out cultivating in a small pond to see what was feasible. I have cardinal flower, that is a lobelia cardinalis, and I also have cattails that are growing. I had duck potatoes, the wapatos, but my ducks actually ate them. So, but I had a smaller pond, and I think if I had even a larger pond and I had koi in there, I think that they would eat a substantial amount of the greenery, but I'm not sure how much because they're not a native carp.